Okay, so in this tutorial, I'm going to cover how to create a door family. Now this creating a door family follows the same kind of principles and foundations as the last tutorial, but it's just a rather more complicated, complex um, family. And we're going to be doing a whole lot more reference planes, more parameters. We're going to be exploring some of the void tools, how to create openings, and then some of the annotation tools as well. So how do we get it to look like this in a top view, but look like this in a front view, right? So we have to add certain annotation tools. If you haven't yet watched the first tutorial, the previous tutorial on the table family, then I highly recommend that you go back to that one before watching this one, because in that one I cover a lot of the basic principles, and I cover that in detail. And in this one, I'm going to go ahead and just kind of skip over, or I'll gloss over some of that stuff, so we could get into some of the more complex or complicated um, attributes of the door family. I also recommend that you kind of skip around in this door family, meaning I actually think you should give it a shot, take it to as far as you can without watching my tutorial or without watching the tutorial. And then once you get stuck, then try to find that place in the tutorial so that it teaches you how to get over that hump, and then stop the tutorial and keep going again, right? It's one thing to kind of follow these steps. You could go ahead and follow these steps step by step, and this is how I do it. But the goal here is for you to start to learn how Revit thinks and how you should go about creating these families on your own. The reality is that in the real world, all of these families are going to be very unique, very complicated, and it's much better to understand how to create your own families and set up your own parameters, understand how Revit creates families. And really, the only way to do that is to give it a shot yourself. Okay. And then just use this tutorial as kind of your fallback, as a backup plan. That's how I envision, or that's how I would recommend moving forward. Okay. But in this tutorial, it's going to be a very lengthy one. I'm going to go into detail with some of these things. And there's a lot. There's actually going to be a lot to process here. Okay. So this is the door that we're doing. It's really kind of an exterior French door with a glass panel on the inside, and the door swings to the exterior side here. Okay. Um, so let's jump right into it. I'm going to go into Revit, and we're going to create a new family. Now this time we're going to create a door family. Okay, so again, we kind of go down the list and see which is the more appropriate template to start off with. Last time we used the furniture. Since we're creating a door, I think it's best to use the door family. So we'll go ahead and open that. And the very first thing we're going to do is save it. So we'll go save as, and I'm just going to go ahead and call this French. Let's call it custom, because I'm not sure if Revit already has a French door. Um, or you could put your initials, something to indicate that this is the one you created and not to get mixed up with something else in Revit's family database. Okay, so right off the bat, we see it's very different than our family and our furniture template, right? Here we see we have walls. We already actually have the frame projection. And then we have a note here that says exterior and interior. That's going to be really important so that we understand where the door is being placed. Now, typically, we draw doors and windows kind of centered to a wall, but the reality is that they're not. Take a closer look at a door next time, specifically your exterior doors, and you'll notice that the exterior doors, and the same with the windows, typically are placed closer to the exterior side and not the interior side. if you go back to the door and windows tutorials, at the very beginning of these tutorials, we kind of talk about the reasoning for that is so that rainwater doesn't kind of puddle inside. So we want these exterior objects as close to the exterior as we can so that water doesn't seep through. So that's going to be important here to understand that, okay, our model is going to be on the exterior side and not on the interior side. Now, on the tabs, you'll notice that we actually only have the reference level, which is kind of this plan view. And I think you noticed in the family table, sorry, in the table family, it was very beneficial to be able to have the top, front, even right side view and a perspective, okay? Although with this one, I think we just need the top and then a front. So I'm gonna come over here to the left side and I'm gonna open up exterior view. And in here, we could see this is just a regular kind of casement door, right? It's a 3 foot by 7 foot single casement door. And then we're gonna want a 3D view. So that's what that kind of looks like. But what I'm going to do now is hit WT. Now that I have these three open, I'll hit WT and it's going to tile my windows. And then I'm just going to kind of center everything. Okay. Now, just like the family, the table family, we're going to be adding a whole lot of reference lines and parameters. And one of the things you'll notice is that the dimensions here are kind of big. And the text, all of this stuff is kind of big. The same thing over here and right there. It's legible. It's nice because it's easy to read. But you can imagine all of this text is going to start to get in the way when I start adding all these reference planes, parameters, things like that. So one of the things I could do is actually change the scale of the drawing. So I'm going to click on the bottom corner here. I'm going to change that from 1/2 inch to, let's go small, 1.5. Now remember, the scale doesn't actually change the scale of the model. It's just scale down here is really the print scale. So what is it going to print as? With these families, we're not actually going to print this kind of sheet. We're going to import it into a drawing or into a project file. And from the project file, we'll go ahead and insert it, right? So the text itself is kind of irrelevant as far as the scale goes because none of this is ever going to get printed. But on the flip side, it does minimize a lot of this stuff and makes it easier to kind of navigate. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. Let's change this to 1 inch. Now I can see it really focuses more on the 3D model. Let's do the same thing over here. We'll go 1.5. There you go. Okay. And over here, I'm going to change this to shaded view because that becomes easier to see. Now, the other thing too is that you'll notice that I have a line over here, and that's this line right there. That line represents the opening. So there's already an opening inside here that we don't have to create. Revit has already created that opening. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is delete and kind of prep the template to work the way we need it, or to kind of to just kind of clean it up so that we can work more efficiently here. So we're going to be doing a double door here. We don't need these swing lines, so I'm going to select them and hit the delete key. Okay. Eventually, we're going to end up creating our own. And then what I'll do, uh-oh, did I just delete? You see, and this is exactly why we have the 3D view. In deleting those swing lines, I see that I've deleted the void. So let me Control Z, undo. There we go. Let's try this again. I must have accidentally selected the void itself and deleted it. So let's not do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click that line and click that line. That's what it should look like. And the 3D model still looks good. Okay, looks correct. So I'm going to go ahead and orbit around to the exterior side. The way I know that it's the exterior side is because we see that line again on the back side. That's this line over here, and that's on the interior side. So the next thing I'm going to do is just kind of move these. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to kind of really bring these all the way out. I'm not going to be playing with the mullions, but it gets tricky. We have to click it and then you kind of hover around. You see my cursor gets that move, turns into kind of the arrows. That's a sign that it acknowledges the move. So now I'll go ahead and click and drag. I think my EQs and these reference planes, actually, they're gonna have to get bigger. So let's bring that up. Come on. Go up there. You could leave them if you want and then change them down the line once you need to change them, like extend them if they have to get bigger. I already know kind of what we're going to be doing, so I'd rather just make that change now. Okay. All right. Now the next thing that we're going to notice is that there's multiple reference planes. Okay. In the furniture one, there was only two. Here we have these already set and these, the exterior, the ones that are aligned with the wall. And then in addition to that, we have the center marks, okay, with the ones that are right in the middle. Just like the furniture ones, these you really do not want to touch, okay? These planes or these reference planes here, the entire model and the entire existing template is surrounded or is modeled around these two reference planes. So we don't want to adjust any of these, okay? Now, one last thing before we actually get started is we want to flex it, okay? Just so that we understand how big things are and making sure that everything that we didn't accidentally delete something or break a constraint to get started. The last thing we want is to start modeling on a template that is already messed up. So let's go ahead and just flex this. I'm going to change the height to 9 feet and let's change the width to 6 feet. I'll hit apply and OK. And that looks correct. We can check the height. There's the width and it changed in plan. See here, this reference plane is going to have to come farther out. Now, I purposely made it 6 feet. This is essentially, let's move that up too. This is essentially the opening of our French door. That French door has two door panels that swing out, but it is two of them that are 3 feet in width. Okay, so that's why I kind of set it to 6 feet. Now we're going to go ahead and start off kind of with what we know. You always want to start off with the most basic and the largest objects of whatever it is you're trying to model first, and then kind of whittle it down and start working on all the little details. So the very kind of biggest object is obviously the door. So we're going to go ahead and create that door. I'm going to start off by using a reference plane. Let's go to create reference plane. And it's going to be the same process. Okay. I'm going to create a reference plane for the door thickness. So there's this reference plane. Let's go ahead and dimension this. Make sure that we are clicking on the reference plane. This is going to get really tricky with this door template because it's going to want to select the actual wall and you don't want to reference or dimension anything to the walls because your walls change, right? You might have a very thick exterior finish, but the core itself is, I don't know, 2 inches away or something like that. So we don't want to reference the wall. We want to reference the reference planes. So I'm going to click there, and bring this out. Oops, do that again. This gets a little tricky, so let's click there. And this is kind of one of the things that happens when you start to have more and more objects or items there to select. Revit wants to dimension to everything. So let's pull this out, and it's actually better to zoom in and move the cursor away where there's definitely nothing out there. Okay. And we'll go ahead and select this, and we're going to create a parameter for this, and we're going to call this door thickness. We'll go ahead and say OK. And I'll double click in there. And typically doors are about 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches. Sometimes they can be 2 inches, but they're somewhere in that range. So let's make this one 1.75 inches. Okay. Now, if I did that correctly, the reference plane itself moved. Okay. Now, again, we're going to flex everything before we actually start to model. I know it might sound annoying, and it's a nuisance, but I guarantee you, it's going to save you a lot of time, because if we don't flex at every kind of moment or every important moment, then if something goes wrong, if something goes south, it's going to be harder to figure out how far back do we need to go? What is the issue? But if we're flexing at every single moment, we know, okay, the last thing that I did is what's wrong. So let me go ahead and take a look at that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just flex this door thickness. Let's change this to 3 inches. I'll hit apply, and there we go. It moved. So that's all I want to see. Make sure that it's responding correctly. Let's move this back to 1.75. Apply and OK. And then I'll go ahead and create form. So I'll use the extrusion tool, and I'm going to click on one corner. Oh, let's click. Oh no. Let me hit the skip key here. Give me 1 minute. These zoom controls are in the way. Okay. Hopefully that'll work. I'm going to use the rectangle tool and click there, and we'll get to the center right there. Okay. Now remember, this is the one opportunity where we can see all 4 lock pads at the same time. So we're going to go ahead and click on each one so that they are all locked. And while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and just do the other side too. This is one of those parts where I'm really kind of fast forwarding it. If you don't know what I'm doing, highlights, lines overlap. Lines may form closed loops. Let's take a look at that. We'll see. Let's ignore that. If you're not sure, oh, so the dimensions would over-constrain the sketch. All right, let's cancel this. I was trying to have this shortcut, but remember that one of the boundary lines rules is that you can't have overlapping lines. And right here, we have the overlapping line from this door and this one. So let's not mess with it. I'm just gonna hit the Control Z, so that we do one panel at a time. But I do want to click on it and make sure that everything's locked. Remember that if it's not locked and you have to get it locked, you could always use the Align tool to pull up that lock pad again. But again, this is one of these things where I really cover in detail in the previous lecture for the table family. So let's go ahead and hit the check mark. And here we see the extrusion. We can come out here. Okay. And what I'm going to do is lock the top. So I'll use the Align tool, align it to the top reference plane, and right there, and hit the check mark. Okay. And now we could see it over here as well. Okay. So, oh, and one last thing, we also have to lock the bottom, because remember there's certain instances when we place a door, but we might want to offset the bottom sill. right? Maybe we want to place the door higher up. Well, that's always in reference plane, or that's always in reference to the reference level. And if we don't lock the bottom of the door to the reference level, then it'll always kind of stay loose, and we're not going to be able to make that change when we say we want to offset the sill height, the bottom of the door, to 1 foot or something like that when we actually place the door into the project file. So in order to do that, I'm just going to move the bottom part of this mass up, and then I'll come and I'll use the align tool, make sure that I'm clicking on the reference level, and then align the bottom, and then I can lock it. Okay. I'll hit the escape key twice to get out of that. And now I'll go back. I'm going to try to create this one a bit faster. We'll go to create extrusion. And I'm going to create this massing here. Oops. And I'll hit the lock pads. I kind of just count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know that there should be 4. I'll hit the check mark. I'll use the align tool over here and start over. Align right there and click at the top. There we go. I'll hit the escape key and grab that object right there. Move it up and then use the align tool and click from there to lock the bottom of my door. Okay, so we have the massings. Now let's flex it. Let's see, does it actually work? So let's go over here. Let's go ahead and change the door thickness to say 3 inches. We're going to change the height to, I don't know, 8 feet and the width to 7 feet. I'll hit apply and OK. And everything adjusted. That's 7 feet. That's 8 feet. And the door thickness also changed as well. So that's good. So let's go ahead and bring it all back. So let's make this 1 3/4. I'm going to set the height to 7 feet and the width to 6 feet. And this is really going to be my base kind of default parameters that I work with. Okay. So we have the massing of the door done. Now we have to add the glass. And in order to add the glass, we need to create an opening inside here. In order to create an opening, we need to use our void commands instead of the extrusion. The extrusion creates massings, the void kind of subtracts. But just like everything else, before we actually model something, we have to create the reference planes. Okay? And if we take a look at the door, we'll see that we have the door itself has a frame all around, and it has a thicker frame at the bottom. Okay. Now, just for reference, or just so that we understand the terminology, when talking about doors and the frames around the doors, the top portion right up here is known as the rail. So we have top rail and we have bottom rail. Okay. And typically, depending on the type of door that it is, but most exterior doors, the top rail is actually thinner than the bottom rail. Okay. That mainly has to do with accessibility. Typically, we have about 10 inches at the bottom minimum, so that someone in a wheelchair can kick the door open if they need to without having to kick the glass. So that's why we have a thicker door, a thicker rail, bottom rail at the bottom here. The verticals, though, are not called rails. The verticals are called stiles. Okay, so when we're talking about the door stiles, we're talking about these vertical frames. When we're talking about the rails, we would have to say the top rail or the bottom rail, but it's referring to the horizontal frames of the door. Okay, so let's go back to Revit. I'm going to come over here to the exterior side, and I'm going to create my reference planes. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of create a couple for the stiles. So I click to start, click to finish, and then I'll hit the escape key to get out of there, because if not, Revit's going to want to continue creating more reference planes, right, from where I left off. So then I'll go ahead and create my styles. Oops, right there. And I'm just eyeballing it right now. I have no idea. I have no idea how far these things are apart. Okay. But notice also that they're all kind of aligned. And I mentioned that in the last tutorial. That's just to kind of help organize my reference planes. So now what I'll do is I'll use the dimension tool, and I'm going to click there and there, hit the escape key, select the dimension, and we're going to turn that into a parameter. I'm going to call this one styles, or just style. And by the way, the styles is spelled S-T-I-L-E, not to be confused with like your dress style, S-T-Y-L-E, two different things. So I'll hit OK. And let's go ahead and adjust this. All I did was double click the text there, and that's going to allow me to edit the dimension. So let's change it to 4 inches. And we're going to do the same thing over here and move this up. Now, I wouldn't create a different parameter for this, because if I change one style, I want all of them to change. Okay. So what I actually want to do is copy this one or assign this dimension to this style so that they're linked. So I'm going to select this dimension, and instead of creating a new parameter, I'm going to click on this pull down, and this pull down shows all of the parameters that I've created so far. Some of these you've watched me create. Some of these came in already with the template, like the frame projections. So here I'm going to change this to style, and you'll notice that the text changed, and it also automatically moved my reference plane correctly. So we'll do the same thing over here, and align that. Select the dimension, hit the escape key in between so that it gets me out of the dimension tool. And I will select that dimension and set it to styles. Do one more, right there to there. Hit the escape key, click on the dimension, and pull down to styles. There we go. So now all of our styles are set to 4 inches. So now I'm going to create another set of reference planes. So I'm going to go to the create, come on up here, and this is going to be for my rails. So I'll create one at the top, and I'm going to create one at the bottom. But these are going to be their own individual parameters. Okay, so I'll go ahead and click on this one. We're going to go ahead and change this, and we're going to call this top rail. And the reason why I'm making these an individual parameters, I'll make the top one and then a bottom one, yet the styles stay the same, is because, again, typically all your styles are always going to be the same thickness. And the top rail is typically going to be the same thickness as the style itself, but that also, there's a lot of flexibility in that sometimes will change as well. So you might have a thicker top rail, but typically the top rail and the bottom rail are not the same thickness, typically. Okay, so let's go ahead and change this to just 4 inches. And then we'll do one more dimension. And that's from there. Remember, we don't want to dimension the wall, so I'm going to pull back a little bit and make sure that it's selecting the reference level. And then I could go ahead and kind of bring this in. I'll hit the escape key, grab that dimension, and this is going to be my bottom rail. I'll hit OK. And there we have it. So we have our styles set. We have the top rail and we have the bottom rail. Let's go ahead and flex this. So I'm going to change the height and the width of the door. And then I'm also going to change the thickness of the style to 6 inches. Let's make the top rail 8 inches, and we'll make the bottom rail 10 inches. Okay. I want to make sure that the reference planes I created adjust accordingly, which they did. 9 feet. These are all 6 inches apart. The top rail is 8 inches and the bottom is at 10. So everything adjusted correctly, which is good. So let's go back and go ahead and change this back to, actually the bottom rail, I'm going to leave it there. The height, I think is 7 inches. I'm going to change the style to 4 inches. The top rail is also going to be set to 4 inches and the width is going to be set to 6 feet. Hit apply and okay. All right, and there we have it. Okay. So we have all of our reference planes. We're now ready to add the glass. So before we could add the glass, we need to create the opening. What good is having a glass material in the middle of the door? So this is where we're going to go ahead and use the void forms, okay, to cut an opening. So I'm going to click on void forms. I click on the pull down and I'll use the void extrusion, okay? And I'm going to use the rectangle tool and we're going to hit the escape key here. I'm not sure why that happened. Let's go ahead and try again. Can't draw because work plane is at a very sharp angle in this view. I'm not sure what's going. Let's hit the X. Let's get it out and let's try this again. Create void form, void extrusion. Hit the rectangle. There we go. I'm not sure what that was about. Let's go ahead and create this void here. Now at this point, I should be able to create this void as well. And I just realized I did not hit the lock pads. So let's go ahead and make sure we hit these lock pads. But this one here, you know what I'm going to do? Instead of having to hit a line and do that whole clicking, double clicking everything, aligning everything, then clicking the lock pad, I'm actually just going to select, place my cursor. If I'm not sure if you guys remember on, I think it was the roofing, we place the cursor and then we hit the tab key on the keyboard and it selects everything that is connected to each other. I'm just going to delete this and we'll start over. I think this might be faster. There we go. And now let's hit the lock pad. I'm going to count them 1, 2, 3, 4 to make sure that I'm getting all of them. Okay. So now this is going to create a void. Okay. I'm going to hit the check mark. Oh, got to save the project. Now you'll notice nothing happened, right? Like these doors still seem very solid. But when I come over here to my reference plane, you'll notice that I have these two kind of boxes. And these two boxes, if we look closely, are not intersecting my door, right? There's the door. There's the beginning and the end of the box right inside there, okay? So I don't see an opening because the void isn't cutting through the door. So let's go ahead and just select this triangle here and extend this out. And you can begin to see it over here sticking out. I'm just going to click on the outside. Okay. And now they're intersecting, but they're still, massing is still not cut. And that's because we need to use the cut tool. So we're up in the modify tab. I'll select cut. And the first thing I'm going to do is select the door. And then I'll select the void. And there we have that. We're going to do the same thing, but one of the things that you'll notice is that the void went away, right? Like it disappeared. It's still there. It's a little tricky, but if you move your cursor kind of in between the doors, they pop up, right? They're just invisible. So let me go ahead and let's actually just jump to the cut tool so we can cut the other door. So we're going to we're going to select the door and hope we can find, yep, this is the annoying part. Okay, how do we get this? Let's hit the tab key. Nope. And of course, here, I just saw it. Let's select it. Okay. So it actually helps if we select it um, from this door. Okay. This is kind of a problem because we created the voids at the same time. Had we created them individually, then we would see each void, the void's mass individually, and we could select them. But since we built them together and then we did the cut on with one door, it erased the other one, right? Or made it invisible. So right now I have it selected. Okay. So that's why it's staying there. Let's go to cut. Oh, let's click on the door again. And you know what? I'm just going to come over here and let's click on that void. So look at my cursor. It's actually not over here where this door is. It's on the other door that we already created the cut. That's how it's popping up. So let's just click on that. And there we go. Okay. So now we have the openings. And now we flex again. So let's go ahead and just quickly, this time I'm just going to check the height and the width, 9 and 7, and hit apply. And okay, I want to make sure that the void is, you know what, I should test out the styles too. So I want to make sure that the void is behaving correctly. So let's change this to 6. We can do the same thing with the top rail, and the bottom will set to 12 inches, which is 1 foot. I'll hit apply and okay. And that all looks correct. Okay, so far so good. Okay, let's go ahead and bring this back to 4 inches. We'll bring this back to 4 inches. Let's change the height. I believe it was 7, and the width is set to 6. Apply and okay. All right, so this is where it's going to get maybe a little bit tricky. We're going to create a couple parameters, and the dimensions are going to be tight because we have to do all sorts of things in between this door. So one of the things that I actually kind of recommend we do, well, we'll give it a shot. Let's see. Is let's change the door thickness. Right now we're going to add the glass. Okay, and the glass is going to go in between the door, but it's a tight space. And because it's a tight space, it's going to make it very difficult to create dimensions and parameters and things like that. But we have the door thickness as a parameter. So let's change this and let's make this, I don't know, let's go with 4 inches. Apply and okay. And so now my door got fatter, right? Now I have a little bit more space to work with. But I have to be careful and understand that this reference plane is the default one. Okay, it's not the one I created right now. It's one of the default, the crosshair default reference planes. What I need to do is create another reference plane that is going to act as the center of the door. The center of the door frame, because I'm going to add the glass and the glass is going to go in the center of the door frame. So we'll hit reference plane, start on one side, bring this over here to this side, and hit the escape key. And so I want to place this one centered. So we've done that before using the EQ on the dimension, right? So we'll hit the line dimension. I zoom out because I don't want to click on the actual wall itself. So I'm going to click back here just to make sure that I'm selecting the reference plane correctly. So I'll start there, click right there and grab that new center reference plane that I created. And then I'm going to click on this reference plane, which is the door thickness. Okay, move the cursor farther out and click. Then I'll hit the EQ. Okay, so now I know that this center line or this reference plane is equal distance to my door thickness. And then I'll go ahead and create another dimension, and this one's going to be a parameter because I'm going to want to have the option to adjust the thickness of the glass. So I'm going to come over here, place this there. Oops. See, that's exactly what I mean. It wants to dimension everything, so we have to start over. I'll hit from that reference plane to that reference plane. Let's move the cursor up. Okay. So now I'm going to select this dimension. We'll create, I take that back. I'm so sorry. That's wrong. I'm going to delete this. We want the reference plane centered, right? But from this reference plane to that reference plane is not the thickness of the glass. That's already the door thickness. I need to create the actual glass itself. Okay, so let's do that. Let's create the geometry for that. We know that our reference plane is already equal distance, so I could create a piece of glass that references this middle, the center of the door thickness reference plane. So let's go to create, extrusion, rectangle, okay? And I'm just gonna kind of eyeball a shape or a rectangle. Okay. And in here, I'm still in sketch mode. This is where I'm gonna go ahead and make set the parameters. So we know that I didn't lock anything. So here, let's just use the align tool and click there to lock that. And then click there and lock that. As you can see, this is kind of what I was getting at the very beginning. There's a whole lot of steps in this. And it's very easy to make mistakes or just kind of gloss over or miss one of the steps. And so that's why we flex the objects all of the time. Okay, there's a whole lot going on here. Had I not locked it and had I gone over when I flexed it, I would have seen that there was an error. So then that would have reminded me that like, oh, I need to lock this panel or lock this boundary line. Okay, that's why we flex. And it's okay to make these kind of mistakes. It's part of the process. It's going to happen. Okay, so I've locked the edges, but I can't lock the top and the bottom because there's nothing really to lock it to. So I'm going to use my dimension tool and we're going to click on the center there and click on the top and we're going to do an equal distance dimension. So I'm going to bring this out and just kind of click out there and I'll hit EQ. Okay. And now this is equal distance from the center line of the door. Okay. And so now this is locked, right? Because we hit the EQ. So now what I want to do is another dimension that is for the entire thickness. I think I clicked on the wrong. So let's hit the dimension again. There and there, which is the thickness of the glass, which is what I originally wanted. So now click out there. Let's select this dimension. We're going to go ahead and create that as a parameter. And this is the glass thickness. I'll hit OK. And let's change the glass thickness to 3/4 of an inch. It's really not 3/4 is thick. but there it goes. So now you'll notice that I'm still in sketch mode. I'll go ahead and hit the check mark. And there we have it. Okay. Now when I click on this is an actual extrusion, so it should have a thickness. But when I come over here, I don't see anything, right? And the same thing over here, nothing is there. Well, if we try to be really careful, or if we detailed, we could take a look and we'll see that's the top of my extrusion, right? So the reason why I don't see it is because my door styles, sorry, the bottom rail is the same thickness, the same height as the glass material that I've selected. Okay. So what I'm going to do is come over here, and you'll notice I'm going to hover over and using my cursor, I'll hover over where the edge is, and then I'll hit the tab key on the keyboard, and that's going to allow me to toggle through the different objects until finally I find the extrusion. I can click on that, and I'm just going to bring that up just like that. And now I'll use the align tool. I want to align it to the top there. Remember, I'm clicking on the reference plane. And now this might be a little tricky. There we go. We want the extrusion. Let's bring that up. Okay. And we're going to align it right down there. There you go. So now this massing is locked. Can I lock it? See, now I'm second guessing myself. Nope, it did. That's how we know we locked it. It gives me that error. So let's just cancel that. Okay. Okay, so now let's move on to the next window. I don't do this at the same time because they're different pieces, they're different objects. Okay. But this time around, we can go a little bit faster. If I can, we'll go to create, extrusion, we'll click on the rectangle, and I'm just gonna go ahead and go around this reference plane, lock it this time around, and then I'll use the dimension tool, and I'm going to click there, and then click the other side, pull this out and move the cursor up, and I'll hit EQ. Okay. So now this is equal distance, and I'm gonna go ahead and create another dimension from one side to the other side, bring this out. Now I'm not going to make this a parameter because I already have the parameter. So I'll click on the pull down, and this is gonna be glass thickness, 3/4. There we have it. I'll hit the check mark. And then I have to come over here, and it's right there, but let's go ahead and just hit the tab key until we select it. Come on. There we go. And something's wrong here. Oh, so you see that the glass is going through the door jamb, right? That's the actual frame right on this line. You take a look over here, you'll see that the edge of that object is right on along this line. So that's okay. I am going to move this over. It's not going to allow me, so I'm going to remove the constraint. Okay. So you actually have to kind of try to force it so that you can get that error sign so that you can remove it. Okay. So let's go ahead and click on it, and let's move it from over here to this side. And now we could lock it. Okay. Now let's come back again over here, hit the tab key. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up. And while I'm at it, so that I don't hassle with it later on, let's bring the bottom up as well. So now I'll use the align tool, up top, right there, and hit the check mark. We're going to do the same thing. Oops. We're gonna do the same thing over here, align to the bottom rail, align right there, and hit the lock pad. And now you could begin to see that we have a material inside there. Okay. Now let's go ahead and flex it. Well, come on up here. And we're going to change. This one's going to be a while, so let's change everything. So let's bring this to 9 inches. The door thickness is going to go back to its default state, which is 1 3/4. The glass thickness, let's change this to 1/2 inch. The height, oops, not 1.2, 1/2, there we go. The height is going to be set to 9 feet. The style, let's change this to 6. Top rail is set to 6, and the width, let's change this to 7. Hit apply and OK. And everything seems to be working good. Oops. So the style's changed, but the door and the glass itself changed as well. The height changed. And when I come over here, let's see, the door thickness is 1 3/4, which is what I wanted. And that looks like 1/2 inch right there. So everything seems good. Okay, let's go ahead and change this again. Let's go bring this back to 1 foot or 12 inches. That I'm going to leave, change the height to 7, change the styles to 4, top rail 4, and the width 6. Now these are just my default settings. You could use whatever default settings you want. Okay, as long as you stay consistent, that's all that really matters. I'll hit OK, and there we have it. Okay, okay, that seems to work. All right. So we have the door, and now we have the glass. So in theory, we're done, but not really. There's still a lot of information we need to add. So now that the door is actually done, well, it's flexing correctly, and we have all of the geometry set. Now we have to deal with all of the annotations because this is going to go into a project file. And when we add it into an actual project file, we want it to look correct on an elevation. We want it to look correct in a floor plan. Okay. So we're going to start off by adding the swing lines, the door swings, or the hinge side, or the hinge lines here on the elevations. It's the ones that we deleted at the very beginning. Now this can be somewhat complicated because if I draw a line right now here, but then later on I flex it and my door gets wider or gets taller, then those lines also have to be able to adapt. Luckily, since we are in family mode and we are creating families, Revit understands that. And so we have a really nice tool under the Annotate tab. We have a symbolic line that actually kind of locks itself to the object and will flex on its own without us having to really do much. So I'm going to go ahead and click on symbolic line. Now, the trick here is making sure that we have the correct subcategory, okay? Because this is how we're going to tell Revit that we want this line to behave. So I'm going to click on this pull down, and right now I'm going to create the door swings. So here we have elevation swing, and we have projection and we have cut. Projection means that it's kind of projecting onto a 2D surface, which is what it would look like in an elevation. So an elevation is a projection. A cut is like a floor plan cut or a section cut. Okay, so what does this thing look like when we're cutting through it? But for what we're going to be using is just an elevation swing. Oh no, I forgot one thing. We need the middle. We need the middle of the door. So let me go ahead and hit the escape key. Let's just create a really quick reference plane. Okay, right in the somewhere in the middle. And let's go ahead and create a dimension. And now we're actually going to set it correctly to the reference plane here. Let's bring this out, and I'm going to hit EQ so that it places it right in the middle here. Okay, so now let's go back to annotate. We'll click on symbolic line, and elevation swing is set, and we're just going to go ahead and draw it. So I'll click there. Now that I know where the middle of the door is, I'll click right there, and I'll click right down here at the bottom, and I'll hit escape. I will not try to continue on to the other side, right? I want to hit the escape key so that Revit knows, okay, this is for one object. Now let's go back and create another one for a different one, for a different door. So elevation swing, and we're going to come up over here, come down, and down at the bottom, hit the escape key. Notice that my line, my hinge side over here, is to the edge of the door and not the door frame. Okay. Same thing over here. We don't want to go up to the door frame. We want to go to just the door, because the door frame isn't swinging. The door frame's not moving. It's just the door itself. Okay. All right. So now we have that. Let's go ahead and flex this really quick so that you can see what I mean. I'm just going to change the height to say 8 feet and the width to say 7 feet so that you can see that it also moves. Hit apply and OK. There we go. So you'll notice that my swing lines also moved accordingly. So that's what we want. Let's go ahead and bring this back to 7 and bring this one back down to, nope, not 7, 6. Hit apply and OK. All right. So now it looks good in elevation view. Now we have to make it look good in plan view. So we're going to follow the same process. We're going to use annotate the symbolic lines. But this time the subcategory is going to be a plan swing. Okay, because we want this thing to show that it's swinging in a plan view. So I'll go ahead and click plan swing projection. And I'm going to draw a line from this corner that goes up. Now, right now, my door is set to 3 feet. So I'm going to set the line and have this line go up 3 feet. Okay, and then I'll hit the escape key. Remember when at the very beginning, I adjusted and I moved these elevation lines? This is exactly why. You see that the line that I just created goes past my reference plane. So let's go ahead and click on the reference plane down here, and let's bring that up. We always want these reference planes to extend past the object that we're drawing, just because this up to. So that we could have access to click on that reference plane and not have to go hunting behind the actual object. So here we have that line. Let's go ahead and create another one, symbolic. But this time I'm going to use the center and arc. So that means I click on the center first, and then the end of the arc, which is right up here, which is a 3 foot. And then it's going to create an arc for me. And if I did it correctly, it's going to end right at the middle where these two doors meet. Okay. Let's go ahead and create the same thing for the other one. If you wanted to, you can go ahead and flex this as well, and you'll see that it does move without us having to do anything. We'll go ahead and move this up, type in 3, enter, hit the escape key, and I'm going to come over here to create that arc. So it's going to go again from the center there, move it up, and then we get the arc. Hit the escape key. Let's go ahead and flex this really quickly. Let's change this, and really we're just changing the width. So let's change the width to 8. I'll hit apply, and you can see that it adjusted, right? Great, that's what we wanted. So let's go ahead and move this back to 6 and apply, and okay. All right. Now, unfortunately, that's not enough. In a floor plan, we want to see more detail. So we want to see the actual door thickness on here. Now, it's not as simple as just drawing another line because the door thickness is a parameter that we change, right? One instance, the door thickness could be 1 inch, another one, it could be 2 inches. And it's not going to be correct if in a plan view, the door thickness is set to 1 inch, but the door, or the door thickness shows as 1 inch, but we had set it up as 2 inches. So this line that we're going to be adding to represent the door thickness does in fact have to match the same parameter as this one here. Luckily, we know how to do that. We'll hit create, reference plane. I'm going to go ahead and create a reference plane over here. Come all the way down. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to create another one over here too, because I know we're going to need that. Bring that down. Okay. So now create a dimension between these two reference planes. I'll select this dimension and I'm going to change this to door thickness. There we go. We'll do the same thing over here. From there to there. And I'm going to select this dimension and change this to door thickness. There we go. So now I could go back to my Annotate tab and select symbolic line. Start at the bottom. And we're going to draw the actual frame of the door. This is where it gets a little weird, but the detail is so minimal, no one's ever going to see it. So I'm going to go to that arc and I'm going to cut straight across, click, and cut straight across just like that. Okay. And then what I want to do is lock that reference or lock this line to this reference plane. So I'll hit the line tool, click here and click there, and now I get the lock pad. Perfect. Let's do that one more time. I'm going to go annotate, symbolic line, and we're going to use, oh, let's just go ahead and come down here. Click, click, come on up. Click and, oh, when these two lines intersect, it always kind of stops. Okay, there we go. And then I'll use the align tool. Click there and click there, lock it. And let's quickly change the door thickness. Let's save this project. I'm going to go ahead and flex the door thickness. Let's say it's 3 inches. And apply. And there we go. You see how the line moved as well. That's what we want. Perfect. So let's go ahead and change this back to 1 3/4 of an inch and apply. Okay. We're not done yet because we also want to show the door styles on a 2D plan. So I'm going to hit the Annotate tab. We'll hit Symbolic Line. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and draw a couple lines representing the styles, right? The door thickness or the style thickness. Okay. And then we're going to run some dimensions from that line to the adjacent line. Pull this out and we'll select the dimension. And I'm going to assign this dimension the same thickness as the styles. There we go. So let me do that really quickly for these other two, right there to there. Select this, move it to style. There we go. Okay. Dimension from there. Got to zoom in sometimes. To there. Oh, it's already 4 inches. Perfect. You know what? While I'm at it, let's go ahead and do this one too. There to there. I'll select both of these and assign these to styles. And there we go. Okay. Now let's do one last flex, or that's not the last one, but to be done with these annotations, we will change the door width to say 8 feet. And let's change the styles too. Let's make them thick. So we'll go 8 inches. And we'll hit apply and OK. So we come back over here and it got wider. My styles also got wider. My top rail didn't. But when we come over here, you'll notice that it also adjusted correctly. And that's what we want. Okay. So let's go ahead and change our parameters again. Let's go ahead and change the styles to 4 inches and the width to 6 feet. Apply and OK. Okay, we're almost there. Okay. In a floor plan view, this is what we would see, right? The door swings. However, we would not see this, the door closed. That's not what we would end up seeing. So we actually have to hide this, but we need to hide it only in a plan view, because if we hide it all entirely, then it's going to hide an exterior as well. So what I'm going to do is select the object. And on the left-hand side, I do not have my properties. Let's go ahead and click up here. So there's my properties box. There we go. So I have the object selected. I'm going to click right here under visibility graphics. I'll hit edit. And this is going to allow me to say which view or when should this one object be shown. Okay, it's not deleting it, it's hiding it, but it's being selective to the views, which makes sense because I do not want this to be shown in a plan or reflect ceiling plan, or when cut in a plan or reflect ceiling plan. So I'm going to deselect that. I'm going to hit OK. Now you'll notice that it kind of gets ghosted. It changed a slight color. So we're going to do the same thing over here with, hit the tab key. Make sure we grab the door. Nope, that's the void. There we go. And we'll go to visibility graphics and we can do the same thing. Deselect, and hit OK. And we'll do the same thing over here. Grab this door. And while I'm at it, this time around, I'll go ahead and grab the glass too and edit this in plan and we'll cut the plan. Hit OK. And there we go. So it's ghosted. It's still there. Okay. And it's ghosted, so it's not going to actually show up when we put it in a project file, which is what we want, right? Because we want to see the door swing. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and save this file. Okay. The last thing we're going to cover is adding material to the door. So to add the material, what we're going to want to do is actually set the material up as a parameter because we want to be able to edit that when we place this door. We want to be able to change the material. We don't want to predefine the material right now. So in other words, if we want a wood door frame, we could set this up as a wood door frame, but then it is always going to be a wood door frame. And if we ever wanted to change that, then we'd have to duplicate and copy this material or copy this door and then create a new one and then change the material. We don't want to have to do that. We can just go ahead and set the material as a parameter so we always have that flexibility. So what I'm going to do here is select the actual door frame. And it's actually easier to select it on, it's easier to select it in the 3D view. And I'm going to come over here on the left-hand side and see where it says material. Now, if I click inside where it says by category, this is where it permanently sets the material. But there's this really tiny, doesn't even look like it's anything, empty box, this rectangle right in here. That's what we want to click. Okay. And this is an associate family parameter. And I'm going to click right down here, and that's going to create a new parameter. I'm going to call this door frame mat for material. I'll hit OK and OK. Okay. So now, here, let's go ahead and we'll do the same thing over. Actually, no, that should be fine. That should be fine. Let's actually go ahead and create this one or select this one. And we'll do the same thing, click over here, but we're not going to create a new one. We're just going to select the door frame material and hit OK. So this way it assigns it to there too, to that too. Now the glass might be a little bit trickier. Oh, never mind, I take that back. Let me hit the control key, do a multiple selection so that I can grab both of these. And we're going to click on material and again, click on the little rectangle right there. I'm going to create a new one and I'm going to call this glass. I'll hit OK and OK. Now we just assigned a parameter to those, a materials parameter to these objects. We haven't actually set the materials. In order to do that, we would go and flex it. And when we come over here, you're going to notice that we now have a new category, materials and finishes. And here's my door frame mat and my glass. So I can click on by category, click on the three buttons, and that's going to open up the materials library for me. Now by default, there's, what is it, 3, 6, 7 materials to choose from, which is nothing, right? But I can click on open, let's bring this down. Let's open existing library. No, let's not do that. Why am I drawing a blank? Oh, here we go. It was hiding. Let's bring this down. So right here where it says materials library, we're going to pull that up. And right here where it says home, we're going to click on AEC materials, open up this folder. And here, this is essentially the your entire materials library folder that exists within Revit. Okay, these are all default materials. So I can select, you want maple, let's go with the maple. Maple, I can click and I can drag and drop, or I could hit this button right over here. And it's right there. I'll hit apply if I can. We'll hit apply and OK. And now my door frame is set to maple. Now let's hit, and now let's go ahead and just change the glass since we're here. We'll click on the three dots. Glass is actually one of those 7 materials that was already in there. So I'm going to select glass. I'll hit OK, apply, and OK. Okay. And there we have our material. Now the maple doesn't really look like it did much, but that's because we are in the shaded view. If we click over here and go to realistic, give it a minute. There we go. So now this is what it would actually kind of look like. The maple's kind of white. It's pretty light. But anyways, we could adjust that material in there as well. And when we flex it, we have that option to adjust that, or change the material. So I'll just hit OK. And now we are done. Okay. We can, the object or this door frame flexes, we could adjust the door thickness. We could adjust the thickness of the glass. We could adjust the thickness of the stiles, the top rail, the bottom rail, the overall length or the overall height and the width of the door, and the annotations will adjust accordingly as well. So this door has all sorts of flexibility. So it takes a lot of time, but you can see how useful it would be to have an object that can do so much, right? The last thing is we save it. And now let's go ahead and add it somewhere. So if we already had a file open, we could say load into project, but I don't have a file open. So let's go ahead and go to new. We'll go to browse. Let's go residential, open. And I'm actually going to do the same thing that I did with the table. If you remember correctly, what I did was copied and paste the file into the doors family. Let's go ahead and pull this out. There we go. Let's make that big. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a wall. Let's go with exterior wood siding on wood stud. Let's turn on our details, set it to fine. We'll go ahead and turn on shaded as well. So there's my door, or there's my wall. Okay. And then I'm going to go to door. We're going to go to load family. And then I'm going to go locate it. And it's right on my desktop. And it was custom French door. And I'm going to hit Control C to copy. Control C. And I'm going to hit cancel because I don't want to open it just yet. I'll go ahead and go through this process one more time. Doors, load family. And now let's go into the doors folder. And I'm going to put it in residential. And now I'll just hit Control V. V as in Victor. And now it's there. And now it's always going to be there. I could hit open. And there's my French door. I'll go ahead and place it. And look at that. You notice how the lines or the doors are invisible right down here because we went into the visibility graphics. Okay. The door swing looks correct. Let's go ahead and let's go to the 3D view. Oh, the 3D view is back here. Come on. There's our 3D view. Let's change this to shaded view. And there's our door. Let's go ahead and go back to the first floor plan. Let's select the door and edit the type. And here, essentially all the parameters that we were flexing with is all in here. We change the material. Right, so we can change this and say, you know what, this really should have been just a door panel. I'll hit OK and apply. I could change the bottom rail. I could change everything that we set this thing up to do. Hit apply and OK. There's my 3D view. There we go. That looks better. Okay. So there you have it. This is a much more extensive tutorial on families. We covered a lot, but hopefully, you know, with more and more practice, you have a better understanding of the process to create families that have a variety of parameters. Okay. Hopefully this was useful. Good luck, everyone.